All right, guys, welcome back to the Make or Break show. We're hanging out with metal worker maker extraordinaire Jason Hurst today from Works by a Hurst. Thank you so much for jumping on and chatting with us.
Thank you for having me. I really appreciate it.
Yeah, man. So excited to get into your background, and this is for if you guys are watching this live. This is our second attempt, and so in the first one, you were talking a little bit that when you were growing up, it kind of sounded like you got put into the role of kind of the man around the house in terms of fixing. Is that right?
Yeah, I never had a role model, like a maker role model. Some people's dads, they make things and they watch their dad make things. Well, my dad was absent from the picture, so I ended up having to fix and repair everything that a dad would do. The lawnmower breaks, the toilet breaks. My mom was on a very low income because she was a private school teacher, so I ended up having to help her, and so it took off from there. I just that and I really enjoyed playing with Legos. Legos are my thing. I still have my Legos. I have these giant tubs of Legos, and I gave them to my son, and he has my old set plus his old set, and hopefully he'll give them to his children. And my daughter has part of my set, so I was definitely a Legos child for sure.
That's cool. I feel like Legos is a very common thing. I'm pretty sure almost everyone I've talked with has mentioned Legos at some point because they're so fun. Were there any builds that you remember from Legos? Like, were they kits or were you just making your own stuff?
Well, I'd buy kits and then make them once and then take them apart.
Yeah.
I had made this like blue spaceship. I was probably 8 or 9. I made this really intricate blue spaceship, and we were on vacation, and my mom had like a party, and probably a 3-year-old child, and I walked away, and she took it apart, and I was devastated because I didn't know how to put it back together. It was like it was a flash in the pan. It was a one-time shot, and I remember that being like my biggest crushing experience as a child was having that model that I made taken apart and not being able to put it back together. So yeah,
Yeah.
that was probably my most memorable build as a Lego maker.
So at that time, were they making like Star Wars Lego kits when you were growing up?
I don't remember them. I remember like the castle, which is pretty famous, the castle with the knights and the
Yep.
archers. And I remember like Lego City. It was pretty plain Lego City type stuff. There wasn't
Okay,
none,
cool.
they didn't have the fandoms yet.
Right, right.
So
So then outside of Legos and then kind of fixing stuff around the house, were you like building things like with tools more traditional, like the woodworking or even the metal stuff growing up?
not really. I didn't. I always tinkered with stuff. I used to build a lot of computers. I really enjoy tech, and so I used to build my own gaming PCs and design rigs and stuff. And then my actual journey into making with metal and wood did not start until about 9 years ago when I wanted to restore a car, an old
Okay.
Volkswagen. I love German cars, and I wanted to make this an autocross racer, and the car was in really, really, really bad shape. It needed new floor pans, everything. So I bought my wife got me 2 books on welding, and I bought my Millermatic 140. And I went to the local metal place, and they gave me a box of scraps. Even though there's a bigger supply place, I still used them because they gave me this like 20-pound box of drops, all different sizes. Just here, take this. And I went through a whole bottle of gas and several rolls of wire and taught myself to weld, and that just spiraled out of control from there.
Yeah. So how long ago did you say that was?
9 years. We went back, and it
9 years
was
ago.
9 years ago. Yeah.
Okay. So you mentioned that this isn't your day job. You work for the railroad. So after high school, is that the path that you went into before we circle back to the making side?
Oh, no, no problem. I was actually attending college, studying geology. I really like
Okay.
being outdoors. I love nature. I like outside. So geology is a good way to do that and get paid. Map making and things of that nature. Um,
Where at?
it was Austin P State University, and right on
Okay.
the
Yeah.
border between Tennessee and Kentucky.
Okay.
But
Cool. Yeah. I'm from just an hour east of Atlanta. So I know a few people that went to Austin P. So that's cool.
It was a great geology department. I mean, it's a liberal arts school, and the geology department was very, very small at the time. I mean, you had 4 students to 1 teacher, so you got really good hands-on education there. 2 things happened. One, I was dating my wife at the time, and our son. We found out she was pregnant with my son, and I had 2 years left on that degree, and I knew I needed a job pretty much immediately. I needed a job that paid well. So the railroad, I knew from prior experience that they pay well and they have good benefits, and so I said, well, let's do that. And so that's how I ended up traveling from Tennessee to Kansas City for the job with Union Pacific, and that was 15 years ago in
Nice. Okay.
'03. So I've been here. I've been in Kansas City for 15 years. I was born in Pensacola, Florida, at the Naval Air Station. Lived in Alabama in the backwoods hunting and fishing. Mom was a teacher, didn't pick up the accent, so I can't say y'all and ain't. She'd smack me. And then Tennessee for college, Kansas City for the railroad.
Jeez, that's cool. You when you said that you were from like the deep south, at first I thought you were talking about like just Missouri,
No, no,
and
no,
because
no, no.
I
We're
grew up
talking
in I
about
grew up in Mississippi, and I was
Alabama.
like, I know where the deep south is. So I don't know if Missouri is it, but where so we're in Alabama.
My grandmother and grandfather retired in a place called Greenville, Alabama.
Greenville.
Not
Okay.
Greenbow, not Greenbow, but Greenville.
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
It's not Forrest Gump's hometown. Yeah.
That's awesome. So for the railroad, so what's your day job? What does that look like?
Currently, I am a switchman. I wear a vest and I operate a remote control locomotive. So basically, I have a railroad set, but it's 1-to-1 scale, and I get to operate the locomotive. It's true. I build outbound trains, and that not being over the road, it gives me opportunity to be home every night and have a regular schedule and make in my shop. So I get
That's
up in the
cool.
morning, take my kids to school. I will make in my shop up until about 1 o'clock, 1:30, grab a
Okay.
quick shower, go to the railroad, and I work there from 2:30 till about 10:30 at night. Come home, go to bed, do it again. So
Okay, so switchman, are you behind a computer? Are you like on the tracks? Like what is that? When you say like remote
there's
control locomotive, like do you literally mean a remote control, like no one's inside of
yes,
it?
yeah. I wear
Okay.
a vest. I wear a bright orange vest, and I have attached to my waist a box. It's about yay big, and it has
Okay.
throttle, brake, bell, horn, forward, backwards, reverse, and all this stuff. And it is it's a robot. There's two of us. There's a foreman and a helper, and we're responsible for monitoring this locomotive. But we run it like you run a model train set, except it's 1-to-1 scale. So there's nobody on it. It's totally remote.
Where's it how far does it go?
Um, the remote system, in theory, can go like 2 miles to the head end.
Okay.
But I have to be able to see the head end, the point of the locomotive. I have to see it. I can't just
Gotcha.
let it run out by itself and kill people. We are very much responsible for where that thing goes and what it does. So no one just runs with nobody on it. You're either standing on the platform or you can see it.
Got it. Okay.
So it's heavily monitored, heavily monitored.
Okay, so I know zero about this. So what does that do if it's only going a couple miles? Like is it transporting stuff during that or is it
No, all the big trains you see on the main lines, trains that travel from Kansas City to Des Moines, Kansas
okay.
City to hundreds of miles, they have to be built, and they're built of hundreds of cars. These trains could be 120, 150 cars long. And so I work, if you can imagine a package sorting facility. Packages come in from all over the country, and they're sorted by destination. Like some are going to Texas, some are going to Louisiana, some are going to Canada, and you put those packages on a truck, and the truck goes toward Canada. But just make the packages boxcars, full size, and we build trains that go to Canada, that go to Texas, that go east. So that's what I do. Is we have a it's called a classification yard. Freight cars come in from all over the country. They're
Got it.
organized and
Okay.
sorted by direction, and then we will build trains going that direction. So if we build a train going north to Canada, all the cars headed that direction go on that train. You put big locomotives on it, and you pull it toward Canada.
Gotcha. That's so cool. You have, I think, the coolest like RC car system of anyone I
it
know. That's neat.
that feeling lasts for about 2 days, and
Really?
then
Okay.
the regulation. Okay, because if I hit anything or if I cause problems, I mean, it's like your job is on the line, and a full size locomotive weighs 400,000 pounds. So a
Terrible.
small one weighs like 280 to 300,000 pounds.
Yeah.
They don't stop on a dime. They don't stop on a
Right.
dollar. They stop, in meters. So
Right.
it can be, it's the fun is sucked out really quick by, oh my God,
Yeah.
I'm gonna get fired.
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
So
What type of how long like did you train to do that? Like when you first started with the railroad, was that your first job, or have you kind of evolved through it?
uh, you evolve through it.
Okay.
You there's like initial training, safety training is 6 to 8 weeks, and then you have like 6 weeks OJT on the job training, and then it takes another 3 weeks of classroom on top of 3 to 4 weeks of field training to operate the locomotive. So you're looking at several months before they cut you loose, but
Gotcha.
you run things on your own. It's months and months and months.
But that's been your job though, with the railroad for the most part?
No, there's so many jobs there. There's like 1,000 people that work in Kansas City. So no, I've been on the road where I
Got it.
was an
Okay.
actual conductor, where I've taken trains north. I've tended to switches. There's many, many, and that's the nice thing is variety. But right
That's cool.
now, if you want to make a ton of money, go on the road. Over the road, you have no life. You're on call 24/7, and you're gone for 2 days at a time. But you make a lot of money. But I would rather
Yeah.
be home in my shop with my wife and my children. I have a wife and 2 children, so I'm not on call. I have a set schedule. I don't make as much as those guys on the road, but I would rather make that sacrifice and make stuff in the shop. You know.
Yeah, yeah. How old are your kids?
My son is 15 and my daughter is 10. My son will be
Okay.
16 the 22nd. He'll be 16 the 22nd of this month. So he's just now 16.
Jeez, is he driving? Or is that a
We're
sore
I'm,
subject?
no, 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 no. It's not a sore subject. I'm teaching him to drive. He has
Oh,
no
gotcha.
desire to drive. Zero
Oh,
desire to
really?
drive. He's terrified. Yes, he's terrified. Terrified
Huh.
to drive.
That's crazy. Okay, so
Yeah.
going back, you wanted to build, what type of car was it? I'm sorry.
No, no, no. You're
Was it
fine.
a rally car? That's what you said?
Well, I love German cars. I
Okay.
really enjoy German engineering, and it was a 1982 Volkswagen Rabbit, and they're not glamorous luxury cars. Over in Europe, they're called the Golf, but that little it's a little hatchback, little crappy economy hatchback, but that car can be made into a very stiff, very light autocross car. Cars that
Autocross, okay.
run these, yeah. So that's what I was trying to do, and I dumped a ton of money in this car in like 4.5, 5 years of my life, and then I stopped. We moved into this home, and I stopped and looked at the. I made the mistake of actually sitting down with a piece of paper and writing down everything I had in the car
Mm,
and everything I needed to put in the car, how
yeah,
much it was going to cost, and how much the car was worth when I was done. And I was like, oh my God, I've got to stop.
yeah,
I've got to.
yeah.
So I totally scrapped it, took it all apart, uh, sold everything off, and bought a lot of the equipment in my shop with the proceeds from that car because I had like $60,000 rolled up in that car at that
Jeez, yeah.
point. Oh yeah, it was going to be a race car. It was going to be a lot of fun, a lot of fun, but not worth it. I'd rather do this.
Yeah. Was that your first, like, go into that world, like cars and autocross, or had that been something you've been interested in before?
That was my first go. I wasn't exposed to cars either. There's something called the Berg Cup, Berg Cup.
Okay.
It's a German hill climb racing. Really, really cool sport. Really, if you ever Google or YouTube Berg Cup, they're these naturally aspirated German cars, and they climb these road courses at tremendous speeds. And I was going to try to replicate one of those cars, and they're really beautiful. But yeah, that was my first foray into cars, into I guess hardcore fabrication and making.
So how did you go did you just see that one day and you're like, I'm gonna buy a car and drop all this money into making, like, is that like, how did that happen?
Well, yeah, I I think one thing my mother gave me, well, she gave me many things. Let me give the woman credit, but one of the and most important things she gave me when it comes to making is I don't have a fear of failure.
Okay.
I just don't. I embrace it. I know it's going to happen. I just have so I've never rebuilt an engine before, and did a motor swap on that car, and I rebuilt a '99 Audi A4 motor, which is a 20 valve turbocharged. Took it totally apart, had a book, and you just get started, and you're gonna make mistakes. You just have to accept it. But I know so many people that are scared to start a project because they say, I've never done that. I would never rebuild an engine. Those are so complicated. And so they talk
Yeah.
themselves out of it before they even get started. And we have so many resources at our fingertips now with YouTube and then the good old book. I love books. You can figure out just about anything if you just have the confidence to just press forward, you know.
Yeah. So, you said welding then, that just came out of
Mhm.
necessity for that restoration? Is that how you got your
Yeah.
welder and got into that?
Correct. The car was totally rusted out. I would have, hindsight being 2020, I would have bought a much cleaner car. My
Gotcha.
car needed floor pans. It needed a new front core support, rear roll pan, needed everything. Plus, I welded in a 10-point roll cage, and all signal, side turn signal delete, and single wiper, all these modifications, it changes, plus new Recaro racing seats, and just hours and hours and hours and hours. Yes, had I paid a shop to do that, that car would have been worth 40 grand for just the shop time,
Okay.
you know.
Yeah.
So I had to do it. I had to do it myself.
So, on the welding side, was it just like you were looking at books and watching videos to teach yourself with all that scrap you got from the scrapyard?
It was books at first. I had 2 books on basic principles, and they were dry, so dry.
Yeah.
And then I saw some photos. I didn't know about Instagram, and I kind of knew about YouTube, but I didn't watch. I just saw what the beads were supposed to look like in the book, and I burned through all kinds of stuff until it looked like it was supposed to in the book. And so it worked out. I mean, I was a little hesitant on structural welds at first, like the roll cage. You know, I didn't want to make nasty welds. That was the last thing I did, and the welds were okay. They were passable. The beads were all right, but I could produce a better weld today than I could then. I would never weld a roll cage for someone else's car,
Yeah.
only my own, because I don't want someone else's life in my hands. You know.
Yeah. Yeah. Okay, so you realize that you don't wanna move forward, especially financially, it sounds like, with everything else you still have to do to the car. You move and then you buy your I guess, the tools that are going to your current shop. Did you know that you wanted to keep making stuff? Like, was it like, "Okay, I'm gonna sell this," and, like, "I know I wanna build out a shop to build some more stuff."
Not really. I sold the car because it was just I had to cut ties. I mean, we have a one car garage, and the shop that I'm sitting in is below my one car garage. It's a
Okay.
concrete like emergency room. So this thing is exactly the size of a one car garage. No, it was a decision of to free up that garage for my wife's car and to get rid of that. I was shoveling money into that pit. And then when I looked at the end result, what would I have when I'm done? Yeah, an awesome racing car, but it's a racing
Yeah.
car. How often can you use a racing car? Am I going to drop the kids off in this super loud, street legal, but just obnoxious, piss off the neighbors racing car? You know,
Yeah.
yeah, seriously, it's just not practical.
Right. So then why did you start building out your shop?
Uh, okay, well, I through some friends that are true, like what I would call an artist, that's just their spirit. I started dabbling in other media. You know, I don't draw not very well. I can try, but I started welding basic sculptures, just figures of people. My first sculpture was like a knight named Sir Tetanus, and he was just big bolts and nuts and just very very basic.
Like
So I
the disease
started,
tetanus? Like you
yes,
get cut?
because
Okay, that's awesome.
yes,
Okay.
Sir Tetanus. He's very rusty. He's
Love
all
that.
scrap, all
Love
scrap.
that. Okay.
I did sell him. I shouldn't have. I have no problem selling my art. I feel like it's a good thing to do because if I'd
Yeah.
held on to everything that I would make, it would fill this room. So it's
Yeah.
good to sell it and move on. So I started welding sculptures like that, and I really enjoyed. I enjoyed the exercise, the mental exercise. I enjoyed the space. It was like I was a kid with Legos. Just zone out, focus on what you're doing, and just make something. And that was the first time I had made something with no purpose. Art has no other purpose other than itself. For the most part, that's like a definition out of a book I read somewhere. So I was making things that had no purpose other than themselves, and I liked that. It was cool. And then magic happened. I had a drunk driver take out my mailbox one day.
Mm.
Came through the yard, took the mailbox out, took a tree out, just destroyed the yard, and then drove away. My son heard it, looked out the window at the age of like I think he was like 9 or 10. Oh, look at that car, and then went back to bed. Didn't tell anybody. So I said, I need to make a mailbox, something that's robust, something that's structural, that if a car hits it, they won't be able to drive away. So I said, you know what? I'm going to really try to challenge myself, pull out all the stops. And so I started the AT-AT, the Walker mailbox. And that was like 3 months of prototyping with cardboard and then getting some scale drawings. And then when I put that mailbox up, the response from the neighborhood and the community was so strong. That's what launched me into the world of making. People really like the stuff I was making, so that's why I'm here. Really, that mailbox.
So how long ago was that when you built the mailbox?
I'm thinking my brain does not log time very well. It just doesn't
Sorry. Okay.
function. No. I just want you to know that all these, when I give you a time frame, it could be grossly inaccurate.
Okay.
I'm thinking 4.5, 5 years, five, something like that, maybe a little longer. maybe a little
Okay.
less.
Yeah, yeah. So, you build that and you get that what was it like getting that response? Like, did you expect people to react it in the way they did?
No, it's a very geeky, nerdy kind of thing, and I
Yeah.
embrace it. I'm very much a nerd, very much a geek, kind of thing. And I didn't realize that I tapped into a fandom that was so, I like Star Wars. I also like Star Trek. I was raised in a Star Trek type house. I like them both. We would have upwards of 10 cars parked in front of the house with people taking pictures, to the point of where I
Really?
was concerned I was concerned of wrecks. Every day my wife would say that there's another person. I mean, we would have people do photo shoots. They would bring out little toy R2D2s, and I mean, I'm serious. And
Yeah.
I had people leaving gifts on the front porch. I've have a little shelf full of little like plastic AT-ATs from McDonald's that people have left for me. Just really super cool people that really I mean, someone put it on Roadside America. So I had a couple driving through Kansas City from Canada come by, see the mailbox, leave me a note thanking me, and then they took off. That's the furthest that I know of that have come by to see it.
That's really neat. It's funny because a lot of the people that we'll talk with, maybe they build some really unique project, but usually they share it like, especially now, like on Instagram or YouTube, and they get
Mhm.
all these comments from people digitally. That'd be so cool to have it. I mean, you literally see the people. I mean, it's kind of weird, but pulling by your house, taking pictures.
Right.
It's kind of like during Christmas when like that one house has that really cool like light show, and everyone pulls up
Right.
to watch it. Except you've got that year round. Is it still
Yeah.
out there?
Oh, it's out there. In fact, I uploaded a video yesterday asking my wonderful Facebook followers if I should repaint it, because it's starting to show its age. It's got some rust on it, and I was like, should I polish this thing up and put another coat of paint and really? And everyone's like, no, 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 just leave it. Looks good like it is. Maybe clear it to protect it, but
Yeah.
don't paint it. Leave it weathered.
I saw that video and I did not realize that was a mailbox because I guess in that video there's another mailbox like right behind it. And so I
Right.
thought you had just moved it like to your front or something. But I guess to the back of the AT-AT is that the actual okay.
I
So you
get
open up
so
the
much.
button, put the bill in.
That's it. I get so
Yeah.
much. It didn't even occur to me that everyone was going to assume that that is the backside or the butt of the AT-AT, because I view it as a vehicle, and I guess it's common
Yeah.
that most people view an AT-AT as like a almost like a dog. So everyone's, so you put the
Right.
mail in the butt, and I'm like, yeah, okay.
That
Just
adds to it. That's so cool.
well, the mail carriers like it, and
Right.
I actually talked to them. I said, because when the first mail carrier dropped the mail off, I said I made sure that it was the proper height, because there's regulations, and it's built around a USPS actual box. So
Okay.
I asked her. I said, "Is this okay? Do I need to?" She was actually there when I was putting the concrete around it. I said, "Is this the right height? Is this okay for you?" That kind of thing. So she was. The response has been great. Response has been really good.
That's neat. Yeah, I would definitely agree with the people saying that the rest leave it because I feel like people spend so much time weathering, especially props, and you just have
Right.
for real weathering out there. That's
Yep.
cool. All right, so going from that, you get that response. It's something you enjoy doing. Then you just start gradually adding tools to your shop and kind of stepping up the projects that you're building. Is that kind of the process?
Pretty much, I was upstairs in my wife's garage, so everything was on rollers. When I've made three of those walkers total, three
Okay.
of the AT-ATs. They're around Kansas City. I would pull her car out. I would roll everything into the shop, make a whole mess for like 10 hours, just destroy it, and then I would clean it up, put everything back away. She would pull her car back in. So we were dragging. Everyone was complaining of metal shards in their feet. I got
Mm,
metal shards in my, because I was tracking metal into the kitchen, because
right.
the
Yeah.
kitchen is right off the garage. So I knew I had to move. So I had my shop on the other end of the house, which wasn't concrete, and this room wasn't finished. It was kind of a dark and damp and musty, not very livable. So, long story short, I cleaned this room up. I sealed the whole room. I moved everything in here because I thought if I throw sparks or if I have a forge, well, a forge is not a good idea. No, very little ventilation, but I can't burn this room down because of the concrete. So, yeah,
Okay.
this has been
So
awesome.
then, was it mostly metal at that point? Like
hmm
metal style tools that you were building out?
I do work in wood as well. I've made some bookcases and things, but I'm
Okay.
not a woodworker. I'm far stronger in metal, and I really enjoy metalwork. I have no biases toward any material. I'll work
Yeah.
with any material, but I'm known most for metal, and most of my shop tools are made for dealing with metal. You know,
What about metal, especially over wood, do you like?
you can weld it.
Okay, get to play with fire.
Well, I genuinely, I'm. That's why if someone asked me, "What are you?" I said, "I'm a sculptor. I'm not a welder. I know welders, and they are really good at welding.
Right.
I'm not. I can weld, but I'm not a good welder.
Yeah.
So I wield a MIG gun like your crazy Aunt June wields a hot glue gun. You know,
Yeah.
that's pretty much so. If you could do that, I guess you can. There are glue guns for wood, so I guess you could glue wood. I've just never
Right.
gotten into it, but I really
Yeah.
like the fact that I can tack steel together
Yeah.
instantly
It's
and
fast. Yeah.
get it running quick. That's what I like about that.
So, is it mostly MIG that you weld with?
I bought a TIG in December and I really enjoy TIG, but I haven't. I started with MIG and I like the fact that it's one-handed and I
Okay.
don't have to worry about filler rock because I'll hold pieces with one hand and tack with the other.
Got
So
it.
it's not
Okay.
the most refined. It's not the most refined work. I know that, but it for my quick sculpting, it works the best for that at this point. You know,
Right. And do you do, is it wire fed or gas, or how do you do yours?
it's gas shielded and it's a standard hard wire fed.
Got it. Okay.
ER70S2 is what I'm running right now.
Cool. And do you still have that same Miller, welder
hmm
that you used way
That
back when?
correct. It's a Millermatic 140, and I bought it because it had auto set where you could select the thickness of the steel and it would do all the settings for you. Because I figure if I needed a babysitter, so it would
Yeah.
babysit me at first. And that thing hasn't put a foot wrong. And I've welded every sculpture I've ever made on that machine to some extent. You
That's
know.
cool. I really want to get into welding. I still haven't pulled the trigger because I know I got to get like the mask, and like I can't just go out like a wood shop, and because I'm gonna burn myself and all that kind of stuff. But it's so cool to see the stuff that you can make with it. Um, so you make the mailbox.
hmm
What was kind of your next? Was it mostly like the Star Wars type props? Is that kind of your wheelhouse? The projects that you mostly have worked on?
They seem to they seem to invoke the most response out of people. I could make a rhinoceros, but a lot of people have seen a rhinoceros, and
Right.
very few people have seen a steel falcon. So
Yeah.
I feel like I feel like staying in pop culture genre that people love. That's the best expression of my time, I
Yeah,
think.
yeah, yeah.
You know.
So the Millennium Falcon was probably the one that I saw first. I was going deep on a rabbit hole because I wanted to build like a Millennium Falcon prop, but I was like, I'm going to use like plastic so I can cut it and all that kind of stuff. And then I think yours was like maybe one of the only ones that I've ever seen that was like straight metal. And I think I saw maybe the finished version of it. So I was like, oh, I guess he must have 3D printed this and painted it. And then I'm going through the process of like, nope, this is metal and this is welded together. This is nuts. So I definitely encourage people to check it out. And I'm going to include a link in the show notes. You have a really cool. I'm telling you what you posted, but for people that are listening, you have this really cool Instagram post that goes. It's like all the pictures lined up of, I guess, the process, the build process for the Moon Falcon, which is really neat to see. And so, where was kind of the inspiration behind that? Was that a personal project? You mentioned you do some commission stuff too, or is that for
I
somebody else?
I I have a very dear friend of mine who so I step long story short, I made the mailboxes and then I stepped away for a while. I wasn't welding because and then he really wanted a T-47 snowspeeder from the Battle of
Okay.
Hoth, Empire Strikes
Yeah.
Back. He wanted a snowspeeder, and he was going through a real rough time. I didn't know that at the time, but I made him a snowspeeder, and he bought it. But it was like sort of like, would you please if you have time? And I made this snowspeeder. It was the first model I ever made that wasn't like the big walker. It was the first smaller model, and it meant so much to him. He's bought Tie Fighter Advanced X1. He's got a standard Tie Fighter. He also bought the Falcon. So when I told him I was making the Falcon, it was sort of like my call to make it. I felt like I was ready for it because it's the Millennium Falcon. You have to put on a good show if you're going to do the Falcon. You can't phone that one in. It's like the USS Enterprise. I haven't made the Enterprise yet because I want to make sure I do that model justice. That spaceship justice.
Yeah.
And he said, well, I'll buy it. And I said, I want you to know I'm going to pull out all the stops on this. This is going to be this is going to be my, up to this point, my best work. And he said, I don't care. Just tell me what you need. And so he bought it. And I made that YouTube video and it circulated around a couple of Facebook pages, metal working pages. It got like 56,000 views on Facebook. And that put me on the map as far as, I guess, a serious sculptor would be concerned, you know?
Yeah. When I think of metal work, like I'm usually just thinking through like tables, so welding up bases, but I'm thinking of like really big pieces that get welded
hmm
together. But you're working on like a really small scale. Like, is that hard to have that detail? Like, like I've never welded, but is that a hard process to get something that detailed that small when you're welding?
Um, not really.
Okay.
I use small wire. I think I'm gonna botch this. I think it's 0.024 or 0.023. It's really small MIG
Okay.
wire, and I have a low amperage MIG machine. So most shops are set up for, like you said, heavier stuff, steel beams and 1/8 inch and 3/8 and 1/2 inch and big stuff. And if you had a giant MIG welder trying to tack something that a little greebly about this big, you would never be able to tack it. You just blow a hole in everything.
Got it.
So I like the small stuff, and there's some things I wish I'd caught on camera where I took two very small wires that were like, I think they were a 16th of an inch, and I tacked them together. So I bonded them with my MIG welder, joined them together because they're the handrail on a ATSD. I
Okay.
wish I could have caught that on camera because that was like I'll never do that again type thing.
Yeah.
It was perfect.
That's deep. So it's almost like, to put it in the, I guess, the woodworking side of things, because that's a little more what I'm familiar with. It's kinda like scroll saw work or something like that, like really detailed work with this, I guess, the gauge wire that you're using. But you
Yeah.
could you could ramp that all the way up.
Well, yeah, I could. I think this welder will do. I think it's right here next to me. I think it's 3/8 single pass with the proper wire, but I wouldn't do 3/8 with a single pass. But if you, that's where I'm separating my trying. That's where I'm trying to separate myself as a sculptor is by delving into the details, trying to get them right, trying to really. So like the Falcon, I would pick an area on the Falcon about 4 by 4 maybe inches,
Okay.
maybe 5 by 5, and that's all I would look at. I would pull out the reference photos of that area. Today, that's what we're doing, nothing else. And we're going to get that area right, and we're not going to stop until we do. If I try to look at the whole Falcon front to back, oh goodness, it would just be like, oh, where do I go? What do
Right.
I, if I jump around? So famous quote from my mother and father, or my mother: how do you eat an elephant? One bite at a time. And that's how I take
Right.
all these projects, one little chunk at a time, until I get everything how I think it should be done.
So what's the overall size of that Millennium Falcon?
It's 2 feet long and a foot and a half wide.
How much does that weigh?
With the base and all electronics, it weighs like 45, 47 pounds, somewhere in there.
Jeez. Okay. Uh, that's what type of, so is it just like a steel base or a welded together base that it's sitting on?
No, if you haven't seen the video, it's got lights and full soundboard, so it takes off and it's got all these sounds for it. And the base is a metal. It's a World War II German ammo can that we turn sideways,
Oh,
and
cool.
I laser engraved the 100,000 Republic credits and the base on. It's not Scarif. I can't think of what was the base in Empire Strikes Back, the Rebellion base. I should know this off the top of my head.
I should too.
I'll
I'm
remember
good.
it. But
Yeah, I'm losing my nerd cred. Yeah.
the logo of that base, and that was one of the crates that, or my
Echo base.
interpretation. Echo. Well, that was Hoth. This was the
Oh,
one
yeah.
that where the Rebellion base.
The other one. Yeah, yeah,
Um,
yeah. Okay, sorry. Yeah.
no, it was that was one of the credit. Okay, so Han Solo delivers Leia to the Rebellion, and they give him a reward. And there's a scene where he's loading crates of credits onto the Falcon, big
Oh,
green
cool.
crates. So I shrunk one down, and that's a credit crate that he got. So it hides, basically it's a vehicle to hide all the electronics, all the switch gear, the 12 volt, 8 volt, 5 volt power supply, and all that stuff to power the Falcon and all the sound and the soundboard. So
Yeah, and that's the other thing that was real surprising looking through your stuff is it's not just these really cool metal sculptures, but you've got some pretty fun electronics that you're wiring into that. And so was that something like was that a skill set that you had from the past that you wanted to pull in, or did you know I want to add lights to this? So you just kind of hacked it together and learned what you needed to learn to make it work.
I've been comfortable with electronics. I'm okay with them. I have no. I've built two 3D, actually three 3D printers now.
Oh,
From
cool. Okay.
not from they're from kits. Like CME CNC has a Delta style Rostock Max. It's a big format Delta style printer. I love them. I've had two, and they require soldering. Um, I just wanted to put everything like the Falcon. I wanted to showcase as much of my possible work as possible.
Got it.
The only skills that I didn't like showcase on that was woodworking and then plastic work because there's no plastic on that model at all, like the canopy or anything. All that's steel.
Yeah. And then I feel like in the video you mentioned, so he wanted it painted,
Hmm.
but obviously like the straight metal looks really cool. What's the process for finishing metal when you're trying to get like a realistic model look? What does that look like?
That is probably the biggest benefit to working in steel because if I made that model out of styrene or plastic or something, I could not weather it how I weather my
Okay.
sculptures because they're so I prime them and I build up the layers of paint till I get the base color of how it's supposed to look like if it was brand new off the factory floor. And then I will take like wire brushes, sandpaper, all hand stuff, Scotch-Brite pads. I will start pulling layers of paint off until I get down to the bare metal. I'll just try to wear it and abrade it in ways that it would actually be worn in real life. So if a spaceship
Yeah.
flies this way, all your scratches are going to go across the ship like that. And then I'll put a wash over it, like it's a coffee wash. Adam
Okay.
Savage at Tested, I got that coffee type weathering from him. It looks like dirt.
Oh, cool.
Basically, it makes it really dirty. And once I get the dirt how I want it, I'll clear coat the whole thing, lock everything in place, so it's like frozen in time. So it's you couldn't do that with a plastic model. You would rip plastic
Right.
pieces off with a wire brush going
Yeah.
back and forth.
Yeah. It's almost like you really weather it. Like that's how it actually like metal would actually be weathered. Because I imagine like you would paint the metal the same way if it's a real ship, and then
Yeah.
it's gonna get beat up in the same way. That's neat.
Yeah, it's nice because a lot of model makers they'll have to like spray silver paint, either
Yeah.
layer it up or spray it to make it simulate metal. Nah, just take the paint off down to the metal, and then it's so easier, so much easier.
Yeah, well, yeah, I'll show you the actual metal this is, made
Right,
of,
right.
the so, I also saw that you're working on, looks like Slave 1, is that right now?
Hmm.
And
Yeah,
you're
it's
playing around
right,
right behind
right
you?
behind
Okay,
me. It's
cool.
right. Yeah, I'm working on two of them.
Oh, sweet. So and, you had gotten an English wheel, so you're doing some curved, pieces on
Hmm.
that, is that right?
Yes, the Slave One is the first like heavily curved model that I've tried my hand at.
W What is that process like for someone who's just never curved or worked with metal in that way?
Let me preface this by saying I'm not an expert at this in the slightest,
Yeah,
but
yeah,
if you, it's hard to describe it. As you squeeze, the English wheel squeezes the metal and it stretches it, so
okay.
it makes like a bubble in the middle. If you have a piece and you stretch it in the middle, it's going to dome and it's going to start to round. Well, as you stretch that piece of metal, the edges get real wavy. So you have to either shrink the edges to take the waviness out. That's why you have a shrinker and an expander. It, I would say the best. It's gonna be harder than you think because you'll hammer the shape on a sandbag and a ham with a hammer and a sandbag, and then you'll roll the shape smooth on an English wheel. There was 6 failures,
Mm,
just complete like don't even I've got them stashed away. They don't even work in the slightest. Just me trying to
yeah,
figure out how does it stretch when you're rolling it this way, does it stretch this way or does it stretch this way or does it do both ways? It just takes close observation and practice until you figure out which way the metal is stretching. You know,
that's neat.
it's an I would say it's a finesse art and I do not have it yet.
Yeah, yeah, but, I mean, from the pictures, I mean, it definitely looks like that curved front, to Slave One looks really um,
I
how
cheat.
much you cheat
I
how
swear to
much
God I cheat.
time do, let's say, like, no, okay, so, like, Slave One, or
Hmm.
maybe like a TIE fighter, so something doesn't require the curving, like, how long does a project like that take?
Okay, I can do an unpainted TIE fighter, the ones I've shown pictures of before, in about 35, 36 hours. And that's,
Okay.
I can do that in 2 days without stopping. That's pushing.
Yeah.
If you mix in other projects, it takes a little longer than that. Something like the Millennium Falcon, it's 100 plus hours. It's
Right.
100. It's between 100 and 150 hours, easy. Um, and then Slave One, I stopped counting on Slave One because I don't want to depress myself. I don't want to know. I just do it when do it, enjoy it, and then sell it when I'm done. So.
Yeah. What's it like? Because okay, so several people that are listening, maybe they are selling things that they're making, and maybe they're
Mhm.
making like you, like super custom pieces. Is that did you kind of stumble into that? Like people saw that mailbox and like, oh, can you build me this? Or have you like actively gone out and tried to sell your work?
Well, people have wanted to buy the mailbox uh, since like the first year I put it up.
Okay.
But I'm trying to go full time. I'm trying to eventually leave the railroad and do this full time. It's a long way to go. I've employed a company. Who they've become very good friends of mine called Your Other Half, and they're my back part of my company. They deal with,
Okay.
helping me market my sculptures, reaching out to customers, how I put together a contract, how I would handle custom orders. Because I want to sculpt, I want to make, and I don't want to think about business stuff. So this company, Your Other Half, they're helping me think about the business stuff. And okay, so how am I going to make this? How am I going to make a living doing this? I can't just
Yeah.
put Legos together in my shop and get paid for it.
Right.
So yeah,
That's
I
cool.
I don't have the answer. Each maker's individual, and there's a lot of ways you could go about selling your stuff. You could take custom orders, but then you've got a wait list 6 months long, and you got the pressure of trying to fill those orders. Or you could just make what you want to make and try to sell it. There's many ways to skin that cat, for
Yeah.
sure.
And did I also see that you have an Etsy store where you're lasering like comic book covers? Is that
Yeah,
a recent thing
that
or what's that?
that was the first iteration of Works by Hurst. I have a laser engraver, and I would laser comic book art and fandom art and things that I would redraw and draw on Adobe Illustrator, and that's where I started. That's the first product I started selling. I don't push them as much anymore because I just don't have time to keep that arm of the business up. But have laser engraved art, laser engraved notebooks with me.
Cool. What laser do you have?
Excuse me. It's a 40-watt CO2 Chinese clone,
Okay. Yeah.
and that is from eBay. They're about $1,400 last time I checked, and it gives me fault codes in Mandarin. So you have to have. I'm dead serious. So yeah, it is. It took me 3 days to get it to move.
Yeah.
Took me another 3 days. I'm not going about 8 hours a day to get it to cut a circle, and that took me 6 months to where I could engrave an
Yeah.
image. And if I had an American product, which is probably a better product, I'm sure it's a better product, and but all the support would have been, you know, far better.
Yeah. Yeah. I saw it and I couldn't tell because I've looked at those Chinese ones before, but always when people are like, "Yeah, it takes forever to figure out what you're doing," and then I pull up
Yep.
like Glowforge, and even though it's like 10 times as expensive, you're like, "Yeah, you can cut something out in 5 minutes after you open a box." So
Yep. Yep.
that's neat. Okay, so kind of wrapping up then. So you're working on Slave One right now,
Hmm.
and you've got aspirations for going full time. But do you have some projects out there that you're excited to work on, or do you have like a dream prop or dream build that you want to do?
Yes, I really want to start capturing moments instead of like replicating. Oh, this is an AT-AT or this is an AT-ST. Did you see Rogue One? It's the movie
Yeah,
Star Wars. Okay. At the end of Rogue One, they have a Star Destroyer and they have a cruiser called a Hammerhead Corvette. And the Hammerhead Corvette pushes the Star Destroyer into the shield gate, that ring, and they break the
right.
shield. I want to capture eventually when my skills are ready that moment. I want to sculpt a Star Destroyer, and I'm thinking about using the ring shield, the shield gate being like the base. And I want to have this thing quartering down into the shield gate with the Hammerhead Corvette on its flank, pushing it. I'm talking about lights and sounds and engine
Yeah,
noises and maybe some. I want to start capturing really iconic moments
that's
so
cool.
that someone could buy a moment versus just a craft. I think that's my ultimate goal is replicating
Yeah.
moments.
I always feel like, especially the like superhero props that I see, it's like the ones that are in a fight that have like a specific scene they're showing that are always the
Mhm.
because you just feel the energy and the action. That's neat.
Right. Yeah. And there's so much negativity out in the world right now. I really want to try to give back some positive energy to the community. That's kind of what I'm trying to do with my shop show on YouTube, trying to put out some positive vibes because I think our country could use positive vibes,
Oh
some
yeah,
positive energy. Yeah.
definitely,
So,
definitely. One question that was coming in, this is from Jason Bailey. So mentioning your YouTube. So for people that may not be familiar with some of your work and your builds, is there a good project for them to check out first? There's a kind of good starting point that you'd send them.
I think I've removed most of the videos that were sort of like just test videos or whatever.
Okay.
So, um, the Millennium Falcon build is my latest video or my latest big project, but any of them is a decent representation of what I've done. I think I have a TIE fighter build on there. I think I have an ATST little build, a quick little like 1 minute clip of me building an ATST. Um, and if you really want to get a good scope of the breadth of my work, that would be my Instagram page. But I'm fleshing out YouTube for sure. I'm gonna start
Cool.
fleshing out that channel.
Yeah, and I'll definitely include links for all of your social as well as YouTube and the builds in the show notes if people want to check them out. Make sure and do that. But thank you so much. Actually, sorry, one more question was coming in.
I
So the
got
House
time.
of Chop, who sorry
Mm.
you were on the other event we had earlier, and now you're on this one. Good. I was like, what was his question? All right, so he's asking how accurate are your sculptures to the models used in the films?
That's the crux of the problem. Good question, Chop. I try to get them as accurate as possible within reason. You can go crazy spending hundreds of hours on a very small section trying to replicate it exactly. So I try to get as like the slave one behind me is studio scale. The
Okay.
dimensions on that model are within a quarter to an eighth of studio scale.
Okay.
Now, finer details, this panel having this little handle on it, I might do a little bit of that, but they're as accurate as I can comfortably produce with my skill set and my time.
Got it,
So,
got it. And when
yeah,
you say studio scale, is like that the scale of the model they actually used in a movie? Is that what that means?
that's that's where it's at. So they've made two Millennium Falcons. They made one. I think it was like I'm gonna botch this too. It's like a 1.8 meter, like 2 meter. It's a smaller model. Then they made a massive, huge model. And Slave One is the actual model is 23 and 3/4 of an inch, like long, and about 24 inches wide. That's the model they used in the movies. That's if someone wants to own a Slave One, model, that the Holy Grail is the studio scale model. That's where it's at.
Do you also have, proportions, like, if this was even though it never has been, if it was scaled up to real life, if it was an actual, like, Millennium Falcon, you could get inside, do you know the scale that your stuff would be compared to that?
Oh goodness, okay. Bandai makes a 172 scale, and I think I'm a little bigger than that on the Falcon. So I'm around like the 172 or below type scale. If you're looking for that ratio, I know that they've done some calculations on the Falcon to figure out exactly how big it would be in real life, and that if you actually look at how it's proportioned this way, you couldn't stand up in it. It's too
Okay,
thin this way. Realistically, if you actually built it to scale, you'd bump your head inside. So
gotcha.
yeah.
But it looks cool, you gotta have the sleep look, that's what you're really going for.
Yeah,
Uh,
yeah.
well, cool. Well, I appreciate your time. I definitely encourage everyone to check out your builds. I haven't seen anything quite like what you're doing. It's neat, and
Mhm.
just thank you for sharing it. I know, especially on the YouTube side, there's a lot of work that goes into the back end of that versus filming. Versus you just want to get in there and work, and so thanks for doing that. But yeah, thank you so much. Is YouTube and Instagram are those the best places you'd send people?
Yes, that's where most of my content goes. I have a Facebook page. You can reach me there, but I'd say Instagram and YouTube are where I'm going to be spending most of my time. And thank you for having me on. I really appreciate you inviting me on. It's an honor to be on your show. So
Yeah, it's my pleasure. Well, thank you so much, man.
thank you.